I'm John S. Rhodes of the Rhodes Brothers. This is Greater Wealth Through Mastery. The topic of today's short talk is why Bitcoin is the least volatile asset in the world. Now, this comes about because people tend to think about Bitcoin being crazy in terms of the price going up and down, radical price fluctuations. One day it's 50,000, the next it's 40,000, the next it's 60,000, the next it's 25,000. At least that's what it seems like. So many people tend to think of Bitcoin as being very, very volatile. Now, here is the thing. The price certainly goes up and the price certainly goes down. And if we think about Bitcoin from the point of view of just the price, indeed, it does wildly fluctuate over time. There's no doubt about that, at least in the short run. However, if we look at the medium term and the long term, we do see a steady up and to the right rise in price over time. So if we think about Bitcoin from a price perspective, certainly in the short run, it does go all over the place, sometimes sideways, but very often it goes way, way up and goes way, way down in just such a short period of time. But over time, that volatility is your friend because the upward swings of price are actually where you get the greatest gains from. And many people tend to only focus on the negative. We feel pain much more than we feel pleasure. Therefore, the volatility is often seen as being very negative, whereas it's both positive and negative. And over the medium and long term, that price volatility is actually your friend, and it will be what takes you to higher highs over time. All right, now here's another thing. When we think about Bitcoin and we only think of price, we are setting ourselves up for failure and feeling that pain that I was just talking about. However, if we think about Bitcoin instead as an asset, the underlying asset itself is far less volatile than other assets that are out there. In other words, we know that there are 21 million at the max. There will not be more than 21 million. We also know the supply or the release schedule. It's very, very regular. And even though the hash rate increases, and even though there are more or less miners depending on the situation, and even though the price might vary wildly day to day, minute to minute, and so forth, what ends up happening is that the underlying asset, no matter what, just has a very steady release schedule. New Bitcoin that is mined every 10 minutes. It is very, very regular. When we know this, we can look at it because it's programmatic. It's in the code exactly how the Bitcoin will be mined and then released. And again, we also know there are only 21 million. So if we look at the asset, it is so firm and so fixed. The volatility is actually exceptionally low. The underlying asset, the actual value of Bitcoin and what it is, 1 Bitcoin equals 1 Bitcoin. And we know that 10 Bitcoin equals 10 Bitcoin. It's only when we apply the US dollars as an overlay on Bitcoin that we see the price fluctuations. But again, 1 Bitcoin is 1 Bitcoin. The dollars, the value in terms of dollars, or it could be other currencies as well, that is the volatility. Bitcoin itself is not very volatile, okay? So that's very, very interesting. And here's another thing about the volatility in the price and the underlying Bitcoin. Right now, at this point in time, there are about $950 trillion in assets in the world. If you add up everything, stocks and bonds and cash, if you add up all assets in the world, I believe it's right around $950 trillion of asset value in the entire world. That includes real estate and so forth. Out of that 950 trillion or so, only 1 trillion is Bitcoin. 1 trillion versus 950 trillion. So as a percentage of wealth in the world, Bitcoin is exceptionally small. It's tiny. And this is a key reason that we are still early. People say we are early. We are indeed early. And this is proof positive of that, simply in terms of a proportion of all the assets in the world. And guess what? It being so small in terms of all assets in the world means that it's going to continue in terms of price to have volatility. There will be a lot of volatility going forward simply because as time marches on, the price of Bitcoin will continue to go like this versus other assets like real estate that move more like this, right? So it's a little bit interesting, a little bit deeper than what many people would have you believe. And I would also say a few other things about this that are critical, and then we'll wrap up. First of all, does this line up with your preconceived notions? Does this line up with what you've been thinking? Leave a comment below. That's a way that I know that you understand fully and completely what we're talking about here. Do you feel the volatility? Because volatility is very, very personal. Volatility is something that we see in our accounts, we see in our checkbooks accounts, we see it online. So we feel the volatility when we see prices go up and down. However, if we take a step back and we're a bit more rational, we can look at the programmatic, the code, the actual underlying asset of Bitcoin and know it's stable. Think about real estate or a house. The price does not really change an awful lot over time. Okay, even when things are going wild and crazy, the price does not go all over the place all the time. Okay, you buy a house, you hold on to it for 5 years, and even with great appreciation, it's something like this, up and to the right, depending on how that looks for you. If you look over time, the variability, the variance slows down. And we can do the exact same thing with Bitcoin as well. Real estate is like that. Let me put it another way with the real estate. When you buy a home and hold on to it for 5 years, does the home change? Does the house change? Does the land change? No, it's the same house, the same foundation, the same plumbing. Unless you make upgrades or additions or you adjust what's happening with the home. In other words, you rip a wall out or you upgrade the kitchen or you do something to a bathroom. It's fundamentally the exact same home, right? Bitcoin is exactly the same way. It's not changing underneath. 21 million. The release schedule is very, very regular, very stable, much like real estate, except real estate is not portable across space and time, whereas Bitcoin stores value. You can hold on to it for an entire year, or every minute you can spend or trade with anyone around the world at any dollar amount or any Bitcoin amount. So you could send 10, you could send 50, you could send 100 Bitcoin just like that. You could just send that amount of cash with no middleman, okay? But back to the volatility. The key that we're going to wrap up with here is that, yes, the price does go up and down. It's crazy. It's wild. That's absolutely true. The price goes up and down. However, over a medium and long term, it smooths out. It becomes very stable. It's up and to the right. That ends up being very, very stable. And more importantly, the underlying asset, the Bitcoin itself on chain, right? Remember, we are talking about a chain over time, right? Blockchain, one after another, Bitcoin added to the blockchain. Anyone can see this at any point in time. This is something we can verify for ourselves. It is rock solid, stable, fundamental. It is wonderful and mathematical. That is true stability. We don't have to worry about the government changing the code. We don't have to worry about the government coming in and inflating the supply from 21 million to 50 million suddenly. They can't just print more at will. Again, stability, bedrock, very, 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 very stable. And if you think about it that way and you live your life and think about things in terms of Bitcoin, the actual Bitcoin is ultra stable. And that is a really beautiful thing, if you ask me. Well, what do you think? Does this fit with your own experience? Let me know in the comments below. Please send this episode to someone who might benefit from its message. It's because word of mouth referrals like this help the channel grow. As always, the Rhodes Brothers do appreciate your support. Thank you for listening. Take a look at the comments below for yourself. Add some comments, like, share, and also be part of the community. And we appreciate you, and we will absolutely see you in the next training. Thank you very much.